Hey, this is manic.mercurian with your forecast for the week of Monday, January 20th through Sunday, January 26th, 2025. I truly hope you are doing well. I have a pretty interesting forecast for you, I believe. We have some major complex aspects, complex configurations going on this week. So I think this week's forecast will be especially great for anyone who might be learning astrology and learning about different aspects, because we're going to start the week with a grand cardinal cross. So we'll talk about what that means. In the middle of the week, we're going to have a kite, which is, I believe it's going to be the most complex aspect that we have this week. And then to wrap it all up, as if that weren't enough, we will have a minor grand trine for the weekend, and that's going to bring some really beautiful vibes, a lot of harmony to the end of the week. So I know we could all definitely utilize some of that. In other news, the moon will be transiting from Libra through Capricorn this week, so it's actually beginning to wrap up its cycle. The lunar cycle is beginning to wrap up this week, and basically we're gearing up or kind of gearing down, I should say, for the new moon that will occur on January 29th in Aquarius. By the way, speaking of Aquarius, Sun is freshly in Aquarius since the Sun just entered that sign on Sunday the 19th. So happy birthday to you, Aquariuses. This is your time to shine. It's also a great time for looking at whatever placements you have in Aquarius, since the Sun will be approaching those placements. I think Aquarius in many ways is actually pretty similar to Capricorn. Most signs that are side by side are dramatically different. You could go as far as to say that every sign side by side is dramatically different, but I would say of all the side by side signs, Capricorn and Aquarius are probably the most similar. And that's because they're both ruled by Saturn. You know, Capricorn and Aquarius are the first signs after the winter solstice. So they both are similar in the sense that the light is returning, the light is coming back, but it's still generally a dark time. It's still winter in the northern hemisphere. So there's still many themes of constriction and dealing with limitation, managing resources effectively. But then the difference is Aquarius is a yang sign. It is an air sign. So there is a certain level of spontaneity and openness with Aquarius that I don't think Capricorn necessarily has. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We will talk about that more later on. As we go through this forecast, I want you to mostly pay attention to 4 areas. If you do happen to be watching this, you can look at these 4 areas of the chart. If you're listening, that's fine too. It doesn't matter either way. But basically, okay, these 4 areas that I'm thinking most of the action and activity are going on here. So one would be Pisces. I know multiple people closely who have major Pisces placements, and this is a really transformational time for people that have major Pisces placements, and that's because Neptune, Saturn, and Venus are all there. So that's a huge area of a lot of activity. Another huge area of activity is early Aquarius and the end of Capricorn, basically. So you can see this cluster here. It's at the top of the chart for Monday, January 20th. Around noon Eastern time. You can see Pluto, Sun, and Mercury are all, on a more technical level, Sun and Pluto are conjunct as we start the week at the beginning of Aquarius, and then Mercury is roughly halfway through Capricorn. So that's another kind of cluster. That's another area of focus. Third focus would be Mars, and fourth would be the moon. So just within those 4 areas, that's where basically all the personal placements are. Uranus is another kind of side note. That's going to be a major point later on in the week involved in one of these complex aspects I was just talking about. Okay, but let's get ahead and start talking about these weird aspects. So for Monday, January 20th, we have a grand cardinal cross, and you can see that here. You can see these like really harsh red lines. Basically what it is depending on how you look at it, you could call this a T-square. These really dark lines are showing a T-square. So what is it? So it's basically Mercury at 18 Capricorn, Chiron at 19 Aries, Moon at 18-19 Libra. Moon travels very fast, so it'll go through all of these degrees today. And then you can even include Mars at 24 Cancer as well. It's only a few degrees, or I guess several degrees off from making that major from that grand cardinal cross. So basically we're involving either 3 or 4 of the cardinal signs, Capricorn, Aries, Libra, Cancer, with this really complex aspect: Mercury, Chiron, Moon, Mars. They're all kind of facing off. They're all coming from positions that are a little bit similar, but they're at odds with one another because they're all different elements, right? The cardinal signs all correspond to the first part of their season. So they're all leaders, I think that's really obvious when it comes to Capricorn and Aries. They are leaders. They want to be in charge. They direct things, right? They are very authoritative. But it's a little bit more subtle how Libra and Cancer are also leaders. I really do firmly believe that. It took me years to really understand that, but it is really true. Libra and Cancer do lead as well. Libra leads through ideas and diplomacy and social intelligence and kind of navigation, and Cancer leads through emotion. So both are equally powerful to Capricorn and Aries. They're just completely, each one has a different element, therefore each one has a different method of leading or initiating, but all the cardinal signs are very much focused on their intentions and how to assert those intentions. So now we are kind of channeling and filtering in all 4, I would say all 4 cardinal signs. Again, you could technically use a smaller orb and exclude Mars, but Mars really has been the center of attention for at least a month, with that long opposition to Pluto, and then Sun opposing Mars as well last week. So I would include Mars. It's an orb of 5-6 degrees. Okay, so what is this? So this is basically, depending on how you look at it, you could say it's 2 oppositions, but also 4 squares, right? It's literally like a cross. It's literally a square. I don't know how else to say it. Like, not a square as in a 90-degree aspect, but like a square as in 4 lines, right? So it's a full box. So this is very tense. It's very intense. It's very chaotic. A square on its own or an opposition on its own is tense. It's chaotic. So now you're adding in 2 oppositions. You're adding in 4 squares all simultaneously. Of course, that's going to be extremely intense, especially for those of us that have any major cardinal placements or any placements at all in the cardinal signs, but especially around, this is tough. Let's just say between 16 and 24 of the cardinal signs, any of those, like roughly kind of halfway through, or maybe a little bit past halfway through any of those cardinal signs. So if you were to use a little bit wider of an orb, you could even say, I don't know, it really just depends on how you look at it. But if you have any planets around any of these planets, so 18, 19, 24 degrees of any of these cardinal signs, that's going to represent a huge major area of potentially stress for you. You're going to be pressured. You're going to have to make some kind of decision, some kind of choice. There's going to be a crossroads here. And I say that very confidently. That this is always the case when it comes to even just a T-square would be a major crossroads, but especially a grand cardinal cross like this. This is very rare. And we all have this happening. We're all experiencing this. This is happening to us. It's just happening in a different part of each of our charts, right? So in other words, Monday, January 20th, it represents a huge crossroads for all of us. We have to choose something. We have to make some kind of adaptation. We have to make some kind of change. This kind of aspect is not only extremely conducive to change, but it's also really great for initiation, for doing something. Squares are problematic. They are harsh. They're intense. They bring change, which can be scary, but change can be necessary. We can, like for instance, this is really great for, if you've been in a rut, if you've been lacking motivation or inspiration, this will kind of like put a fire under your ass, so to speak. This will get you motivated. This will kind of spur you into action. So this could be definitely a necessary evil for sure. Let's look at Tuesday, January 21st. So this is where we actually have a third quarter moon. So this is more square energy. We do see a major kind of dissipation from that whole kind of grand cardinal cross situation that I was talking about on Monday. That does dissipate pretty dramatically on Tuesday as the moon enters Scorpio. But again, as the moon enters Scorpio, then it squares the sun and Pluto simultaneously. So on this same day, Sun and Pluto will be conjunct at 1 degree Aquarius, and Moon will square both of them. So it is, I mean, in many ways, Tuesday does look different from Monday, but at the same time, we're still talking about the same general energy. We're still talking about squares. Okay, so very intense. There's a continued need for change. So the exact situation will morph and develop quite a bit from Monday to Tuesday. But the only thing that is constant here is the constant need for change for Monday and Tuesday. I promise this week will get more harmonious as we get in, a little bit later. But honestly, if we had to have this kind of volatility somewhere in the week, I would prefer to have it at the beginning of the week. I feel like that's only logical, I guess, to initiate something for those of us that do kind of start our work weeks on Monday or even Tuesday. But anyway, let's talk about this aspect. So really interesting stuff. Sun conjunct Pluto at 1 degree Aquarius. By the way, Sun is in detriment in Aquarius. I personally believe Pluto is in fall in Aquarius as well. That's just my own belief. And Moon is in fall in Scorpio. So these placements that are making this aspect with one another, they're all kind of unhappy. They're all exiled. At the very least, we can all agree Sun and Moon are sort of exiled. They're debilitated. And maybe even Pluto as well. So this is indicating we are feeling out of sorts. We're feeling something different. We're feeling kind of alien, unusual. We're very outside of the box. Both Aquarius and Scorpio, even if you just look at the signs themselves, both have to do with countercultures, revolutions, being on the outside, being on the maybe like the opposite side of history, or being not to get political, but being different. Both Aquarius and Scorpio they empathize with the underdog or with the counterculture, right? They want revolution. They do want change. Although they are fixed signs, both Aquarius and Scorpio have a lot to do with evolution. So yeah, this is really intense. Moon is in Scorpio, which is that's the home sign of Pluto. So it's a lot of Plutonian energy. I've also heard the Aquarius Scorpio square called the most sexual aspect, because Scorpio is of course the sign of sex, and Aquarius, although it's an air signs are not usually particularly sexual. Aquarius does have I think Aquarius has a certain animalistic energy to it, despite being very rational and very detached. There is this kind of wild, almost bestial side to it as well. So yeah, these are pretty rowdy, pretty wild signs. They're very unpredictable as well, both Aquarius and Scorpio. They are fixed signs, so they want consistency, yet at the same time, they're not always consistent. Like Scorpio is consistent in how it is constantly changing, right? Aquarius is consistent until it's not, and it suddenly changes into a different type of consistency. So what am I saying? So this is a huge change. It's a huge shock. I think this is, like I said, it's continuing this tumultuous energy from Monday, but it's developed. It's changing quite a bit. So we had to make some kind of decision, choose some kind of path, in this crossroads that was Monday. And then that has led us to kind of like a part 2 on Tuesday, where there's another choice to make. There's more action, there's more volatility. So to put it in really simple terms, both Monday and Tuesday are going to be crazy days. There's going to be a lot of volatility, maybe a lot of accidents. They're going to be dramatic. So, really larger than life things happening just kind of out of the blue. It's like one thing after another. It's not going to be all bad. It will be disruptive. It will be chaotic, but it's going to be a mixed bag, There could be really good stuff happening, really bad stuff. It's like a movie. It's dramatic, intense, theatrical. Really quick side note too. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Mercury at 19 Capricorn squares Chiron at 19 Aries. I feel like this is just like a little, what's a good analogy for it? It's like we have so much going on, and this is like, okay, this is a dumb analogy, but this is what came to me. So it's like there's this whole shitstorm. It's like this whole party has been just like totally disrupted, and the party's over, and it's chaos, and everyone's leaving. And I'm picturing like a little kid or like a puppy or something like kicking over a can. It's just like one more small chaotic piece, but it's kind of a side note. It's almost like a moot point. because Mercury squaring Chiron, it's just another square, but it's not really aspecting anything else super strongly. Technically, what am I trying to say? Mercury squaring Chiron, that was part of the grand cardinal cross on Monday. So because the moon was opposing Chiron and squaring Mercury on Monday, I really think this Mercury Chiron square is actually more relevant for Monday, even though technically it's exact on Tuesday, if that makes sense. But yeah, there is that square there. So this is a funky one. So Chiron aspects in general boost the empathy, but I always say it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not like kumbaya, let's all just gather around the fire and sing campfire songs. That's really not what I see with Chiron, especially with Chiron in Aries. With Chiron and Aries, there is more empathy, but it's very intense and individualistic, which that sounds contradictory, but that's because Chiron and Aries is contradictory. You have the wounded healer in the warrior sign, right? In the hunter sign. So Mercury making this square to Chiron, that's showing that we, on some level, we want to communicate about our wounds and maybe our feelings on some level, yet we're doing so in a very maybe self-focused way, a very individualistic kind of way, and there's some kind of chaos there. This could also represent individuals clashing against the system. I put the system in quotations, whatever that means to you or to the person that's like protesting. Chiron and Aries is protest energy. Chiron and Aries being squared by Mercury and Capricorn. Mercury and Capricorn's more the administrator. It's the system. It's maybe the judge or the police officer. It's like the daddy, so to speak. It's the government. But what's interesting here is that Mercury initiates this aspect, and so I would say maybe there could be some kind of protest, but it really does look like it's initiated by the government or by the authority figure, whoever that is. This can represent many different situations. Whether it's this is gonna, like, as above so below. It's gonna mean different things to different people, but that's the way I would read it. Some kind of administrator or authority figure triggering some kind of backlash, triggering some kind of protest. And this is all happening within the greater scheme of lots of chaos, lots of sudden change. Most of this is very short term. Like, none of these are outer planets other than Pluto, which is not involved in this whole grand cardinal cross I was just talking about. So my point is that this will fade. It will be very intense, but this is really it's like a local event. It's not a regional event, if that makes sense. And I'm using that as an analogy. This could be regional events happening in the world, but it's a short-term thing is what I'm trying to say. It's really just applying to Monday and Tuesday. So yeah, pretty bumpy start to the week for sure. Wednesday, January 22nd, there are no aspects. That's good, right? Moon continues through Scorpio. So again, Sun and Moon are both debilitated, which I do think is interesting. We're feeling uncomfortable. We're not feeling like our normal selves, yet that can be great because we're more able to see other perspectives, new perspectives, new epiphanies, or maybe just seeing outside the box, being open to, unusual information or unusual people or pastimes or whatever. We're seeing things from a different way. We may not be relating to the mainstream as much as we normally would. So, of course there are pros and cons to that. I do think, debilitated placements like these are more challenging generally, but there are huge advantages to them as well. Like, for instance, Sun in Aquarius does have a lot to do with themes of compassion and, envisioning like a better society. Aquarius is very much a problem-solving sign. Moon in Scorpio, there's a lot of intelligence and intuition that comes from Moon in Scorpio. Moon in Scorpio, there's so much deep feeling that comes from that transit. So much deep passion, maybe more passion than any other moon placement, really. And that's actually why it's a little bit out of balance, but that's a huge strength as well. So there's always a plus and a minus with it for sure. Really, I would say Wednesday is a transitional day. So we had those huge yeah, that huge action and activity, that huge volatility on Monday and Tuesday, the huge maybe problems or situations that required change or action, that was Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday is more of a transition where in some ways we are still experiencing some of that volatility. So for instance, Sun in Aquarius, Moon in Scorpio, these signs do square each other, but Moon is no longer squaring the Sun by aspect. So we're still kind of coming off of all that volatility. But Wednesday is a transitional phase because we're starting to move into something that's going to be much different the next couple days, if that makes sense. So Wednesday is kind of just like an in-between day. That's the best way I can put it. Thursday, January 23rd, Moon continues through Scorpio. By now, it's very far away from that square it made to the Sun. So I would expect much of that square energy has dissipated pretty dramatically. However, we do have many aspects happening today. This week is just so wild with these aspects. So for Thursday, January 23rd, this is where we get this KITE, and you can actually see this on the chart. So how do I approach this? Basically, let's look at there's basically 4 points. It's kind of like a box. It's like a rectangle, right? So we have 4 different planets, let's just say, that are all between 22 and 24 degrees of 4 different yin signs, right? So, and you may already be able to see what I'm talking about. So Mercury's at 22 Capricorn, Uranus is at 23 Taurus, Mars is at 23 Cancer, Moon is at 24 Scorpio, and this just happens to be for noon Eastern time. So within today, in the late morning Eastern time, Moon will be at 22, 23 degrees Scorpio. I'm actually going to go an hour ahead just to make this more precise, maybe. Sure, let's just leave it there. So okay, so basically there's multiple aspects all coming together to form a larger aspect. That's what a KITE is. So for instance, Mercury at 22 Capricorn is opposing Mars at 23 Cancer, and that will be exact within the day as well on Thursday. So that's one opposition, and we have a second opposition between Moon at 23 Scorpio opposing Uranus at 23 Taurus. So 2 oppositions, but then we also have 2 sextiles and 2 trines. So if you break it down, there's this weird box here. There's this weird kite. There's 2 sextiles, 2 trines, and 2 oppositions. So I'm hoping that you know at least about some of the aspects. You probably do if you listen to these forecasts. But, the sextiles and the trines are harmonious. The oppositions are not harmonious. They're contentious, right? But you have all of them kind of mixing together. 2 sextiles, 2 trines, 2 oppositions. Lots of harmony, lots of balance, I'm like literally kind of like almost dancing in my seat right now. Like, I don't know how to say it. Lots of like smooth energy kind of moving around. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, there's those 2 oppositions. So there's some kind of culmination happening. There's some kind of, like peak event, like peak drama. I don't know, like the climax of the story, so to speak. But then also there's this fluidity there as well. So it's a mixed bag. It's complicated. It's complex. But you can also look at the players involved: Mercury, Moon, Mars, Uranus. These are all pretty volatile players, I would say. Of course they have their own different personalities, their own different flavors. But Moon and Mercury travel so fast. These have to do with feelings and thoughts, which are constantly changing. They're constantly in flux. And then Mars and Uranus are the 2 most volatile planets in the solar system. So yeah, these are all typically very volatile planets, but they're all in yin signs. Uranus and Mercury are in earth signs, so they typically do have to do with, fluidity and new ideas, new thoughts. But because they're in earth signs, they're wanting us to be grounded. Mars and the Moon, I totally just lost what I was thinking. Mars and the Moon are in water signs, so much more emotional, which is actually pretty fitting for both Mars and the Moon. They tend to be more emotional. Anyway, another pattern that we can look at with this aspect, with this KITE, is that 3 out of 4 of these planets are debilitated. Uranus, Mars, and the Moon are all debilitated. Mercury is the only one that's not debilitated, and Mercury in Capricorn is not like I don't know. I guess Mercury works pretty well on Capricorn, but it's not like the, coziest sign for Mercury. So again, it's just showing that it's a mixed bag. It's bittersweet. There's a lot going right for us. There's a lot that's also kind of unknown and up in the air. We're still feeling out of sorts. We're not feeling like ourselves. There's just so many debilitated placements still. Uranus, Jupiter, Mars, Moon, Sun. I think that's it. Venus is exalted, so that's nice. But she's the only one that none of the other planets are on that same wavelength, unless I missed one. Even Chiron is. I almost think Chiron is in detriment in Aries, even though it rules, or it's at home in Virgo. But whatever, don't sue me for that. That is not unanimous in astrology. But my point is, with all these debilitated planets, again, we're feeling out of sorts. We're not ourselves. Something's off. Like, things just aren't normal. It's uncomfortable. It's alien. It's awkward. But we can have new perspectives. Being outside the box, we might feel left out, but at least we can get like a bird's eye view, or we can see things from a different angle that we wouldn't have seen before. So it's uncomfortable, but this is extremely useful for new perspectives, new ideas, etc. I think that's about all I can say. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details because there are a lot of them. But that's the main kind of gist of it. 2 sextiles, 2 trines, and 2 oppositions all happening simultaneously in this really wild box. So that's what's so wild about this week. Like, just one of these aspects is very rare to have. To have all these little aspects making a larger one simultaneously, very rare. To have 3 situations like this within the same week, extremely rare. This is pretty wild. So I do think, what does it mean? There's so many levels to this. Like, there's one sextile happening on one day, but then that's part of a kite. But then that kite itself is part of a whole week where there's 3 different major aspects like that. So putting it all together, I really think this week is going to change things a lot for us. Things are really transforming this week. It's not going to make headlines. Like, this video might not get as many views as the one I did a couple weeks ago because there were so many planets changing signs then. You know what I mean? So if you just look at the headline, I think it'll be harder to convey how deeply things truly are changing this week. But the reason why is because it's a little nuanced, because there's so many different aspects happening. Things are transforming. Like, imagine if we just had one sextile for the week. Okay, cool. There's a little bit of harmonious energy there. But when you're stacking aspect after aspect after aspect, many of them simultaneously, there's just so much fluidity. There's so much tension. There's so much harmonious energy. There's so much conflict. It's all happening at the same time this week. So basically, lots of change. It's moving us to a completely different situation, a different world, you could even say, although that would be a little dramatic. Friday is another transitional day. So again, I said that there would be 3 major aspects. So Monday, Tuesday was like the big volatility. Wednesday was more of a transitional day. Thursday was that really wild kite. Friday's more transitional again. And then things are going to ramp up astrologically for the weekend, where we get that last really big configuration. Friday, there's actually no aspects at all, which is that I feel like that makes it even more wild. No planetary aspects Wednesday that are exact, and none on Friday, but those days are sandwiched by these huge astrological configurations and aspects. So pretty wild stuff. One change that does happen on Friday, so around midnight Eastern time, Moon does leave Scorpio and enters Sagittarius. So depending on your time zone, it could be late Thursday or early Friday. But for most of us, anywhere within a couple time zones from the Eastern time zone, basically we'll have Moon in Sagittarius all day for Friday the 24th. And this is actually really beautiful because suddenly we have a little bit more harmonious energy. Moon in Sagittarius blends really well with Sun in Aquarius. So much so that we will actually have the moon making that exact sextile to the sun early in the day, Eastern Standard Time, with the sun at 4 Aquarius and moon at 4 Sagittarius. So yeah, very harmonious, but it's really kind of capitalizing on Aquarius and Sagittarius themes. So what do these signs have in common? They're both intellectual. They are both about learning, especially about learning really complex or like profound concepts like metaphysics and society and politics and things like that. But not only are they intellectual, they're also both pretty wild signs as well. Both Aquarius and Sagittarius can be rebellious, provocative. They can be very physical, not just intellectual, but they can be very physical as well, and very adventurous and wild, I guess. That both can be party animals. So that's I'm just illustrating these themes because those are the themes for the day. I was gonna say one other thing. That's okay. This is already getting long enough. I'm gonna move ahead. Okay, so for Saturday, much of the same themes that I talked about for Friday continue on Saturday because moon is still in Sagittarius. Oh, I remembered what I was gonna say. So, and this actually applies to Saturday as well, not just Friday. So the moon is just closing out its cycle. We reached a new kind of threshold with that moon sextiling the sun on Friday, so that was a waning crescent moon, and I guess still it might be considered a waning crescent moon on Saturday, but the moon is getting less and less light. It's becoming a thinner like sliver. It's on Ozempic. It's losing light. It's losing weight, losing that girth, right? And as it does so, it's being, I was going to say eclipse, but that's not really the right word. It's being covered up. It's being occulted is also technically not correct. Whatever. It's being shadowed, I guess. And as it does so, that shadow represents more. It's not actually an absence. It's an absence of light, right? But basically what that shows is that the ether is getting louder as the moon gets less and less light. The more light the moon has, the more physical activity there's going to be, generally speaking. The less light the moon has, the more there's less activity physically, but there's more there's more going on subconsciously, psychologically, spiritually, etc. So that's all I was going to say for Friday, but also as we start to close out this week into the weekend. Okay, but what is this configuration that I'm talking about? So this is really going to apply to Saturday and Sunday, what I'm about to say. There is a minor grand trine. So what is that? So first let's talk about what a major grand trine would be. A major grand trine would be 3 points all equidistant from one another. So for instance, if the moon were still at 22 Scorpio like it was earlier in the week, then it would make a major grand trine with Venus at 22 Pisces and Mars at 22 Cancer. So it's an equilateral triangle. And I feel like that's more common, but I guess technically it wouldn't be. Anyway, a minor grand trine is also a triangle. You can actually see it here. It's this blue triangle on the left side of the chart. So it's not an equilateral triangle. I think technically, is it an isosceles triangle? I don't remember geometry, but basically here we're starting to see Venus at 22 Pisces trining Mars at 22 Cancer, and that is exact for today, Saturday, January 25th. But as Venus and Mars are trining each other at 22 degrees of their respective signs, both in water signs, both are also sextiling Uranus at 23 Taurus. And that's where you get this blue triangle. It's kind of like an arrow pointing at Uranus. So it's two sextiles and a trine. So the difference here from any of those other aspects that we talked about earlier in the week is that these are all harmonious, right? It's depicted here as all blue. Two sextiles and a trine, harmonious, harmonious, harmonious. These energies are all kind of flowing together really beautifully. Venus and Mars, of course, are flowing together. They're both in water signs. They're both in agreement. And Venus-Mars aspects tend to be very sexual, very sexy, very romantic. I don't know if this This one's going to be a mixed bag, though. Okay, Venus is exalted in Pisces. Okay, Venus in Pisces is generally a great time for everyone. There's lots of love. It's like free love energy, like free spirit. Let's all just come together and, everyone's beautiful and whatever. But Venus is trining Mars, which, yes, they are both in water signs. So they are making that, like, phone call. They've got that great rapport, that great conversation. They're getting along so well. That's awesome. But they are in very different places. Like Mars is debilitated in Cancer. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Mars is debilitated in Cancer. Mars is also still retrograde. So Mars is kind of like stepping backward into this whole aspect. So Venus is very strong. Mars is very estranged. Mars is, again, not just debilitated, but also retrograde. So in other words, the pleasure is like very accessible right now. Yet the ambition and the drive are obscured. They're hidden from view. They're clouded by emotion. So it's a funky one. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure how to read that. Like on some level, a Venus trining Mars would suggest like sexuality, romance, flirtation, really enjoying company, especially enjoying like emotion, free-flowing emotion, and finding that kind of attraction in that emotion, because this is a water sign dynamic. But again, there's something, the normal kind of sexiness and drive from Mars is weird. It's like, I don't know, it's like Venus and Mars are having this great conversation, but Mars is not sober. Mars is drunk or something. Mars is on drugs. I don't know. Or Mars is like half asleep, maybe. There's something weird going on with Mars. Someone should check in on Mars. Okay, but both of them are sextiling Uranus as well. Uranus is also retrograde and debilitated. So it's just, I don't know. And Jupiter's sandwiched between them, which is not really relevant. It's not part of the aspect, but Jupiter's also retrograde and debilitated. So it's just a lot of weird stuff. This isn't entirely unusual. For the last few years, we've had a lot of retrograde planets at the start of the year. And another thing too is that generally there are more debilitated placements in fall and winter. So some of this is true every year, but we just happen to have some, outer planets retrograde and debilitated as well. So that kind of, it makes it a thing. It makes it a pattern. But anyway, generally speaking, this is harmonious. There are those kind of caveats that I explored with you, but Venus trining Mars, lots of sexy emotion, but they are being maybe grounded by Uranus in Taurus. There's free-flowing energy there. There could also be some kind of epiphany or awakening about our pleasure or about our romance or sexuality because of this aspect. Venus and Mars are sexuality and pleasure. Uranus is awakenings. But they're awakenings that are coming from a grounded place because Uranus is in Taurus. So that's what I would say for Saturday. And again, that really applies to Sunday as well. You can see Venus is at 23 Pisces, Uranus is, of course, 23 Taurus, and then Mars is 22 Cancer. So it's basically the same. It's generally the same dynamic, same trine and two sextiles, the same minor grand trine. What else? And yeah, Mercury is nearing a sextile to Neptune as well. So a lot of really harmonious energy for the weekend. Maybe even more on Sunday than Saturday. So it looks like a great weekend. So we dealt with all that volatility and chaos during the week. So it looks like we're rewarded with a pretty mellow, harmonious, pretty fun weekend. So really good stuff. And by the way, about halfway through the day, Eastern time, Moon does leave Sagittarius and enters Capricorn as well. Okay, but yeah, this forecast has gone on way too long, but there was a lot to unpack there, so I hope I did a good job for you. I did the best I could. I really hope you have a fantastic week. Next week, Mercury changes signs. There's a planet that will station direct. We have a new moon, and there's going to be a triple conjunction next week as well. So I hope you have a great week. Hope you tune in next week as well. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.